Enemies in games can come in all different shapes, sizes, intelligences, abilities, and features. But in this video, we're going to be going over how to create this specific enemy, who takes damage from the player's era, has animations based on its current state, can follow the player very smoothly, has droppable loot, and so much more. This video has so much information within it, and I hope that you're able to learn something new. So let's just get started. But quickly, if you're able to drop a like on this video and hit the subscribe button so YouTube is able to push this tutorial to more aspiring game developers, then it would mean the absolute world to me. Thank you so much, and now let's get started on this tutorial. Okay, so to get started, we're gonna go and first create the enemy scene, because we can't really do anything. We can't create an enemy without an enemy scene. So we're gonna use a character body 2D for this. And this character body 2D, we can rename to our enemy's name, which is going to be a slime. And in our character, or in our enemy, in our slime, what are we gonna need? Well, we're gonna need a collision shape, we're gonna need a hitbox, we're gonna need a player detection area, we're gonna need a collectible, but we'll go on that later, and we're also gonna need an animated sprite, so we have different animations. So let's do that first, right? Let's add our animated sprite 2D, and on this animated sprite, we can go to our animations and we can click on new sprite frames, and we can just go and create some basic sprite frames like a move animation. And this move animation, well, just like you would create sprite frames on any other game, you can go on and create animations. And all this art is going to be linked in the description because it is the survival series, and it is very, very helpful in my opinion. So for movement, we can use all of these frames. That's going to be 6 frames, and you can kind of see how it looks like the slime is jumping, and that's what we want our movement to look like. Then we can have a new animation. This animation can be idle, and well, idle is going to be not 6 frames because that would not be idling. We would want it to be more like these first 3 frames, because you can kind of see that looks like the slime is in place. Maybe you could do the first 2 frames, or we could slow this down a little bit and say 3 frames a second. You're gonna see that looks more like idling. And we can create a new animation, and this animation is going to be our death animation. This animation is going to be a good amount of frames. We can do 15 horizontal, 0 vertical, or 1 vertical, and these are going to be our death animations. And you can see that's going to be 9 frames. So we want to create this to be 9 frames a second, so it happens in just 1 second. So it's pretty quick. So now we have our moving, we have our idle, we have our death, right? So boom, now we have all of our frames set and all of our frames are working. Let's go to our slime, or first let's go to our animated sprite. Let's set the current animation to idle. Then let's go to our slime and let's create a collision shape 2D, because that's going to be the next most important thing. This collision shape, we can just drag it somewhere like this so it looks a decent amount around the player. And then that's just our basic collision shape. Then we need a area 2D. This area 2D, this first area 2D, it can be our hitbox. And for that, we can just make a collision shape 2D. There's a lot of collision shape 2Ds here. If the arrow passes through this area, well, then it's going to take damage. And then we can add another area 2D, and this is going to be our player detection area. So it's just a bunch of nodes that are all going to come together and work together to create an absolutely amazing enemy. And under the detection area, well, once again, we're going to need a collision shape 2D. And this collision shape is going to be much bigger, because if the player is in this zone, then we want to chase the player. So maybe about that big looks fine, just like that. Then we can go up to our slime. We can add a script, slime.gd, and we can save this. Make sure we save this down here into the right folders. And then we can also go back to our slime and we can save the scene. Make sure we save the slime.tscn into the scenes folder as well. And well, this is going to bring up a bunch of unnecessary code that we are not going to use, so we can remove most of that. Okay, and now for our slime script. Well, it's going to extend the character body 2D, obviously, and then we're going to have a variable for the speed, which we can set the speed to 50 for now. And then we can have another variable for the health. So we'll have a health variable, and that can be equal to 100. We won't do anything with that until a minute. And then we can have damage, but damage is going to be set later. Damage is going to be set once we know. However, or I guess we could pass this through. We'll probably pass that through here in a minute. But then we have var dead, which is going to equal false because the slime isn't dead. And we're going to have var if the player is our player in area, because we want to make sure we know when the player is in the area. And then we can say var player, which is going to be set to null for now, because we will have to set that later, and whenever we figure out what the player is whenever it enters the zone. But now that we have our variables, let's create the actual script. So first, in the ready function, let's create a ready function, and this ready function is going to say dead equals false, because off spawn, if the slime is spawned into the game, we do not want the slime to be dead, right? So that's just kind of a safety. And then we can have function our physics process, and our physics process is going to be the bulk of our enemy. This is how it's going to be able to follow the player. We can just say something like if dead, or if not dead. So if the player is not dead, and let's say detection area dot, well, let's see, so detection area, so if it's not dead, we want our detection area in our collision shape. So we want our detection area collision shape disabled to equal to false, because we want it to be active. If the player is not dead, well, we want the detection area to be active. That's just another little safety that we're going to add in. And then we want to check if the player is in the area. So if the player is within the slime's detection area, which means we want the slime to be chasing the player, well, we can make it move. We can say something like, something basic like position plus equals, and then this is going to be our player, which we haven't found yet, but we'll find in a minute. Dot that player's position minus our enemy's position, and then we can just divide this by speed, just like that. And then we can play our animation, right? Because this obviously means that we are going to want to play our move animation, because we are now moving. But if we're not moving and the player is not in the area, that means we're not going to be chasing. So if the player is not in the area, well, we're going to say else. And we can say animated sprite dot play, and it's going to be equal to idle, because we will not be moving. But then up here you can kind of see if not dead, that's what we want to happen. But if the enemy is dead, well, if the enemy is dead, then we're going to want our detection area collision shape to equal to true, or disabled to equal to true, because we want it to not be working, because we don't really want it to be detecting a player if the enemy's dead. Usually you'll queue free it, but just in case something doesn't happen, we're just going to add this in, and we can say disabled equals true, right? And then now we're going to have to go to our area 2D so we can see if the player is in the area. So we can go up here to our detection area, and we can say node, we can say body entered, and we can send this up to the slime, and then we can also say node body exited, and we can send this up to the slime as well. So if the player, or we have to check if it's a player, so we can say if body, so whatever body enters, if that body has the method of player, so if it has method player, that means it's going to be our player. And then we can say player in area is going to equal to true. So now we know it's true. And then we can set our player to equal to the body, because now we know our player and we know the player is in the area. So that's very, very useful. And then here we can say the same thing kind of, but if body dot has method player, well, we want the player, this means we've just exited, that means the player's exited the area, so we want player in area to equal to false, right? So this is going to signal up here, and it's going to set our player, so now we know the player's position once the player is in the area, right? So this should work. Theoretically, it should follow our player. And the only reason this right here works, if has method player, is because in our player we have a function that is just player. It's just basic player. Nothing happens. That's just a check, right? So now if we go to our world and we instance a slime, and then we go to 2D, we move this slime down here maybe, and then we play the game, you can kind of see that we can run around. The slime's doing an idle animation. Then it starts to follow us. Once we leave its zone, well, it's going to stop following us, right? And we can kind of run back and forth. You can kind of see it follows us pretty far, and once we exit the zone, we can't exit the zone because we are pretty slow. But, you know, if we were able to exit the zone, which we just exited the zone, you can kind of see that we exit. If we go up here to debug, we turn off visible collision shapes, and we play again, you're going to see it looks a lot better. And now the slime chases us nicely, right? And now it stops because we're out of the area. It plays the idle animation. But when we're in the area, you can see it plays the big jumping animation. And it's trying to chase us. It's trying to chase us down, but it can't chase us down, right? And if we shoot arrows at it, well, nothing happens. And that's the issue that we got to fix. So we wanted to take damage. So if we go to our slime and we allow our hitbox to send signals, well, we can see if an arrow entered the zone. So we can say if area entered up here, the area 2D, and we can send this to our slime. And this is going to be, we're going to check if the arrow hits. So we can say something like if area dot has method, whatever that method is. I don't know if we have one. So we'll say arrow deal damage, and then we'll have to go make one, right? And within the arrow. And then we can say damage is going to be equal to 50 because we know it's an arrow. So we want the arrow to be able to do 50 damage. If you have other weapons, well, you can set this damage to whatever you want whenever that method enters, right? So you could have a million different weapons and they would all work with this way, right? That's why we have up here, that's why we have damage set there. Or we could make a local variable and then pass it through, but I think this is good. We can just say something like we can just call it take damage. I don't know why we made it a global, because we could make that a local and it would be a lot cleaner. And let's actually do that. So we can say var damage, and then we can set damage to 50, and then we can pass through damage there, right? And then we can remove this completely up top. Okay, so now we call it take damage. But first, let's go to our arrow script and let's create this. So if we go to our arrow, we see that we don't have anything, so we can just say function arrow deal damage. So, and then we can say pass, and then now we know that the arrow has entered the zone. But then we call this take damage function. So we'll say function take damage, and we'll just say damage because that's what we passed through. And now in our take damage function, we're going to have to subtract from the health, because this is where we're going to want to take damage from our player, right? Or from our arrow. So we'll say health, and we want health to equal health minus damage. And then we want to check if we're dead. So we'll say if health. So if health is less than or equal to 0, which means it's less than 0, then and we have to check okay, well, I don't know what happened. So and 0, and we need to check if we're not dead. So if we're not dead and our health is less than or equal to 0, then we're going to call the death function, because that's what we got to do, right? Because the player's not dead, but the health is not in the positive, so the slime is technically dead, but we just haven't called the death function yet. So now we're going to call the death function for the first time, and we can set the slime to dead, right? We can set the slime to dead. We can play our animation sprite dot play our death animation, and then however long this is, that's how long we're going to want to set a timer for. So we'll say await.getTree, and we'll say create timer, and we'll say dot timeout, but we need to put a number here. I think it's 1 second. That's how long our animation is. If we go to our animated sprite, we go to our death animation, you can kind of see right here. So we have 9 frames a second and we have 9 frames, right? So that's going to be 1 second. So you want that to be set to your animation, so it plays your animation 1 time. So we'll say .getTree.1, and then after we play the animation, well, we're going to just queue free the slime. So now we should have a working death animation, right? So if we go to our world, our health is set to our health is set to 100, so it should take 2 shots with an arrow, 1, 2, and you can kind of see it completely disappears. Okay, so that looks very, very good. So now we have a slime that can die, can take damage, can follow the player, has working animations, but now the only thing that we need left is to add some loot to our slime, and then a couple other things to make our enemy look very, very good. So to add loot to the slime is going to be a little bit more complex. So let's add loot to our slime. And real quick, I just want to mention that this is episode 8 of the survival series, and we have already created the collectible, the inventory part of this series. And I went over this earlier in other episodes, but you can see that this is our inventory, and this is a stick. If we walk over the stick, it's going to collect in the inventory. If we go collect another stick, well, it's going to pop up to be 2. So in this, I'm going to kind of go over how we added item to the enemy, but if you want to see how to create the entire system, well, you're going to have to go and watch episode 4 and episode 5 of this series, because that's where I go over that. But I think it does a very, very good job, and I'm very proud of those videos, so I recommend them. I'll leave them linked in the description below as well. And you'll be able to create that step by step, and it's within the same game because it's within the same survival series. But let's create the slimes loot. Let's go over how to create slime loot, or let's go over how to add loot to the game. So to do that, well, we're going to need a new scene, and this scene is going to be a static body, and this static body is going to be the collectible object that gets dropped to the ground. So we can say slime collectible, because this is going to be the slime collectible. And then we can just say we have a sprite 2D. And also, I forgot to mention that we have a new art piece, and if you want to download it, it's called slime icon, because we're going to be using it for this. It's slime icon, and it's in the itch.io. It's completely free. I'll leave a link to the itch.io as well, so you can download all the art in this game. But I added a slime icon, which is going to be this little icon, and if we add it to our art folder, you can kind of see we have a little slime icon, and that's what we're going to use for the inventory and everything. So if we move this up to our art folder, there is that, and I'll leave a link to that in the description like I mentioned, but that's what we're going to be using for this. So that's what we're going to actually be using for this right here. So we're going to drag that in, and you're going to see that this is going to be our slime collectible. This is what's going to drop on the ground. Maybe we want to go to our transform, because this is going to be pretty big. This is going to be as big as the slime itself. So maybe we can do like 0.5, so it's a little bit smaller. Just like that, we can save the slime collectible into our scenes folder, and a slime collectible, just like that. And then if we go back to our slime, that's all we need for our slime collectible scene. That's it. But if we go to our slime, we go into the script, we have a lot to do in here. Let's first instance our slime collectible. So we can say this, we can instance our slime collectible into our slime. And then in our slime script, we can go down to the bottom, and we want to, in this death animation, you can see that we queue free it. First, we do not want to queue free it, because when death happens, we don't want to just make it disappear. We want to make sure that's visible. So we are going to call a drop slime function. And well, if we create a new function and we name this drop slime, we're going to have to go over and create an entirely new function. So what happens when we want to drop the slime? Well, for now, let's pass, because we have to create some variables. And these variables that we're going to be creating, it's going to be 2 variables. First, it's going to be a onReady var, and that's going to just get our slime collectible. So we can say var slime, which is going to equal our slime collectible. And then we need one more, which is going to be an exported variable, because this is going to be our inventory resource. This is what is going to be the actual slime itself. So we can say var, our export var, and then we can name this our item resource, and our item resource is going to be an inventory item, and we'll create that right now. So if we go over here, you see this little plus button, we click on this, we can create a new inventory item, which is a resource that we created in those other previous episodes. If we name this slime, we drag in our art to our texture, and you're going to see that if we go up here to save as, we can save this as our slime resource, but we want to make sure we save this into our inventory items, where we save our other inventory items, right? Our apple and our stick. We can save this here, and you can kind of see that that is all we need for the variable. So now if we go back down here to our drop slime function, first we're going to want to make sure when we drop the slime, we want our slime.visible to equal to true. So if it's going to equal to true, well, we need our slime collectible currently to equal to not visible, right? Because on spawn, we do not want it to be equal to visible. So once we drop the slime, we want it to be equal to visible, just like this. And then we're going to call a new function, and we're going to call our collect function, because this is going to be our slime collect. Now we're going to collect slime. So if we come down here and we say function slime collect, well, our slime collect function is going to be a function that collects the slime, like does the actual inventory part of the slime. And the actual inventory part of the slime is going to be where we, first of all, we want to make sure we change it to visible. But if we change it to visible right now, it's only going to be visible for 0 seconds. So we can set a little timer here. We can say get tree dot create timer 1.5, and we can say timeout, and then we can say slime dot visible equals false, because now the slime is no longer visible. It's going to be visible for 0.5, then it's not going to be visible. And then since we got our player up here, we're going to have to change this in a minute because it's not going to work completely right. But if we have our player up here, we can come down here and we can say player dot collect, because we have our player. So player is a variable that we have. And then collect is a function that's within our player. And then we can pass through our inventory resource, which is going to be our slime, the resource that we just created, our inventory item resource. And then once the item is collected, we can queue free it, right? But if we go to our slime, we come over here, our item resource, we have to actually load in our inventory item, which is going to be our slime resource, just like that. And if we go to our player, so basically what this does here is we're going to call the slime collect. It's going to, let it sit on the ground for 0.5. Then we're going to collect it in the player. And the player we have from when we enter the area. But this is not going to work for long because we basically have to enter the area for it to work. And I'll demonstrate this. So if we're over here and we shoot at it and it dies and it's going to spawn a little thing, it's going to keep playing the animation forever because we don't hide the animation. So we can come up here to the top, because now once the slime is technically dead and we're just doing the collection part, we want to go up here and we want to change a bunch of different stuff. So we want to, first of all, we want our animated sprite dot visible to equal false, and then we want our hitbox dot collision shape dot disabled to equal to true, and we also want our detection area dot disabled to equal to true, just like this. And now if we go play, you'll see that if we're outside of the area, we shoot at the slime, it dies, it puts out the little slime, it's going to disappear, and it's going to give us an error because player is still null because we never entered the zone. But if we are in the zone and we get it, well, you're going to see that we are going to collect it. And if we click I, you see that it shows in our inventory, which is perfectly working. But we have to fix this to where we know who the player is off this spawn. And to do that, we can go to our slime, we can add a new area 2D. We can name this something like the slime collect area, right? So if the player is within this area, then we can collect the slime, and we can say collision shape 2D. This collision shape is going to be massive, so we can make a circle, and we can make this expanded massively. So if the player is anywhere within this area, then it's going to collect. We want this to start off as disabled, and then we can go into our slime. We can add a node, or we can add a signal from our slime collect and say body entered. And if a body enters, well, we want to check if it's the player. So if body dot has method player, just like this. If it has method player, then we want player to equal body, just like that. And then, well, we want to call this at a certain place. We want to make this visible, and we have to make this visible. Where would we have to make this visible? Right when we drop the slime. So we're going to make this visible when we want to collect the slime, which is going to be, let's see, where would this be? This would be up here. So whenever we drop the slime, then we're going to make that visible. So we're going to say slime collection area dot collision shape dot disabled equals false. And now everything will work. We are going to have a working slime if we go back and we play the game. So if we play, you can see that we have a slime that chases us. We can shoot at it, and it is going to appear into our inventory just like that. But if we play it again, you can see that we have nothing in our inventory. Sorry, the trees are going over. I just don't have the correct stuff, but we're going to fix that in a future episode. But you can see that, okay, it's chasing us again. I did not want to show it chasing us again, but you're going to see that it will go into our inventory just like that. But if we're over here and we're running around and we shoot it from here, well, you're still going to see that it's going to appear into our inventory, right? So now we have no errors, and we can have as many slimes as we want. So we can go to our world and we can instance a new slime into our game. And if we go to our world and we move this new slime around, like over here, well, you're going to see that these items are also going to stack. So now we have working slimes. This one, we've entered the zone, right? And we've killed it and we collected it, and it says we have one slime. And this one over here, well, if we get that one too, you're going to see we never entered the zone, but it's also going to count as a slime. We collected some apples as well, and we can collect some sticks as well. So inventory is working very, very, very nicely, and the slime, the little enemy that we have created in this episode, is also working very, very, very nicely as well. So I want to thank you guys so much for watching. I hope this tutorial was able to help you create a decently advanced enemy for your own Godot games or Godot games. And if you're having any issues with anything, then please let me know in the comments so I'm able to help you out. If you could subscribe and drop a like on this video, then it would mean the world. But until next time, stay safe and have a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful rest of your day. Bye bye.